Hi, I'm Granny, and we're going down the rabbit hole of the Library of Alexandria, Episode 3. What fascinates me most about the library is that it clearly reveals how we humans gain and lose information, truth, very frequently. Just imagine and understand that it was in the 1800s that the first steam engine was created. But the first reference to a steam engine was at the Library of Alexandria, as was wind power. Just think of the information that has been lost and ask yourself, why is it so easy to lose information? The Library of Alexandria was not the first library of its kind. A long tradition of libraries existed in both Greece and the ancient Near East. The earliest recorded archive of written materials comes from the ancient Sumerian city-state of Uruk around 3400 BC, when scholars believed humans first began to develop writing. Uruk is known today as Warka, Iraq. Scholarly curation of literary texts began around 2500 BC. Curation is the organization of data or information, and in a library, it is a record of all the documents within that library. We still have that going on today. The later kingdoms and empires of the ancient Near East has long traditions of book collecting. The ancient Hittites, located in modern-day Turkey, and Assyrians, located in modern-day southern Turkey and northern Iraq, had massive archives containing records written in many different languages. The most famous library of the ancient Near East was the Library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, founded in the 7th century BC by the Assyrian king by the same name. Nineveh was located in the modern city of Mosul, Iraq. King Ashurbanipal ruled from 668 BC to 627 BC. A large library also existed in Babylon during the reign of Nebuchadnezzar II, who ruled from 605 BC to 562 BC in modern-day Iraq. The Greece Athenian tyrant Pisistratus was said to have found the first major public library in the 6th century BC, which makes me wonder who had access to the other libraries. Was it not open to the public? What is that? Anyway, some scholars believe that it is this history and mixed heritage of both Greek and Near Eastern book collections that helped create the idea behind the Library of Alexandria. Now, if you were to look at the culture during this time in the BCs, in Syria and Iraq, it is Iraq that they believe the Hanging Gardens of Babylon was. Some of the most amazing cultures were going on during that time, with gardens and carvings and statues and literature. And to think that that is the only thing that we need to understand, that that was a huge thing, a popular thing, a common thing that took place back there. It isn't just us creating all of these new ideas today. All right, so Alexander the Great in 332 BC founded the city of Alexandria at the mouth of the Nile River on the coast of the Mediterranean. So what is considered the Ptolemaic period of Egypt was from that time, 332 BC, until the Romans conquered Egypt around 41 BC. To understand the decline of the library, we need to go into a bit of the political history of the time and understand that politics has always been a deadly process, even more so during this time. And if you remember, Alexander the Great's father was assassinated. So we need to understand the final ruler, or considered the last ruler of Egypt, was Cleopatra. And she's worthy of her own rabbit hole, but maybe at a later time. She was born in 69 BC and considered the last ruler of Egypt when she died August of 30 BC. She was queen of the Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt from 51 BC until her death at 30 BC. To understand her life, you need to understand that before she was born and while she lived, there was civil war constantly going on in Egypt. Not only from the fighting within Egypt, but also outside, and specifically the Romans. And the first threat of the Library of Alexandria was the Battle of Alexandria Bay, when Julius Caesar was battling the brother of Cleopatra, Ptolemy the 13th. So, because of the constant civil conflict in Egypt, motivated Cleopatra to appeal to the ruler of the Roman Empire. So he joined her forces and they battled. And there is controversy as to who set the fire in the Bay of Alexandria, but it was set. And if you think about it, most of the buildings at that time and the ships were wood. So the fire quickly passed through the bay onto the docks and into the Library of Alexandria. Ptolemy the 13th died in 47 BC during the ongoing war with Julius Caesar and his sister Cleopatra. According to some sources, they believe he drowned. But what I find interesting is he died trying to cross the Nile River. If you understand that the Nile River contains the second largest crocodile in the world, what would motivate you to even try to cross the river? But, oh well, that's something we will never be able to decipher. 3 years later, Julius Caesar is murdered, if you remember, on March 15th, and the phrase, "Beware of the Ides of March," that's when Mark Antony gains power, including a power struggle with another Roman, Octavian. In 41 BC, Cleopatra meets Mark Antony, who aligns her with her against her brother Ptolemy the 14th. And this is something I find really interesting. There is a source that claims that Mark Antony offers to purchase books from the Library of Pergamum, which, if you remember, it was the second largest library at the time, second to the Library of Alexandria. So he was offering to purchase her books from Pergamum to replace the books that was lost in the fire at the Library of Alexandria, which is really pretty cool. So the Library of Pergamum was located in the modern town of Bergama in western Turkey and considered one of the most important libraries in the ancient world, as I mentioned. Plutarch mentioned that the library was located at the northern end of the Acropolis, and the surrounding city at the time had a population around 200,000. Yeah, you have to kind of shift your thinking a little bit when you understand the numbers. 200,000 people lived in that area. The Roman occupation of Egypt marks the beginning of the end of the glorious Library of Alexandria. I imagine campuses nowadays. They have beautiful lawns, um, beautiful buildings, cafeterias, places to sleep, study, and I believe, and from some of the writings, it was a magnificent place of learning. Some opinions are that the reason the library did not flourish under the Roman rule included lack of funding, but also Roman ideology, which was history is less important than the here and now, and that ideas were to be held with suspicion, which really makes me kind of sad. Little information exists on many of the later Ptolemies, but we do know of one, Claudius Ptolemy, who lived from about 100 AD to 170 AD in Alexandria. He studied at the Library of Alexandria, and he lived from, as I mentioned, 100 AD to 170 AD, and he is known because of the books that he wrote and that have been referenced. He was considered a mathematician, astronomer, astrologer, geographer, and music theorist, among other things. He wrote at least a dozen that we're aware of scientific treatises, 3 of which were of importance to the later Byzantines, Islamic, and European science, and they reference him frequently. And here's a kicker. He believed the earth was the center of the universe and that the sun and planets rotated around it. And this belief held firm for at least 1400 years until Galileo challenged it. And we all know he was under house arrest, threat of death, to believe differently. But this is the other thing that bothers me about Claudius, is if he studied at the Library of Alexandria, didn't he ever hear of Aristophanes, who 200 years, 300 years previous, estimated the circumference of the earth and was really rather accurate? There are some stats that say he was within 1 or 2% accurate to 15% accurate of the circumference of the earth. And this was before GPS and satellites. He used what has been referenced to as the astrolabe or catcher of the stars. So it makes me wonder, when the first destruction, the burning of the library, how much of it was damaged? Anyway, so the library, again, was plundered at 200 AD, and then 350 AD, paganism was outlawed and Christianity made official. Emperor Theodosius ordered destruction of all monumental temples not Christian. During this time, many pagan scholars were murdered, including Hypatia. Hypatia was wealthy, educated, admired, respected, well known as a scholar. She studied and taught at the Library of Alexandria for over 40 years. She was head of the school for philosophy, made groundbreaking advances in algebra, and revolutionized astronomy. She used the astrolabe, and that was the reason she was murdered. Hypatia improved the astrolabe, or catcher of the stars, and there are examples of this device dating from the 1200s. The astrolabe helped people calculate time of day, latitude, altitude, height of mountains, width of rivers, all kinds of stuff. The power-hungry, or that's how he's described, Christian Bishop Cyril convinced his followers that Hypatia was a witch because of her use of the astrolabe. She was pulled from her carriage, dragged to a church, no less, where she was butchered and burned. Now, one of the aspects or parts of the Library of Alexandria that seems to have survived was the Serapeum, or what's referred to as the daughter library of Alexandria. It is believed to have survived after the main library's destruction. The Serapeum was vandalized and demolished in 391, but its location seems to have been confirmed. And that was under the decree, the demolishing was under the decree by a Coptic Christian Pope, Theophilus of Alexandria. It does not seem to have housed books, but seemed to be a place where they would gather to discuss philosophy and other such things. And it is currently being excavated by archaeologists. Another source of the Library of Alexandria, or reference to the Library of Alexandria, is Tunis, Egypt. It is located along the Nile in central Egypt, where scrolls have been found that are of the same time period as the Library of Alexandria. French and Italian teams have been excavating this site for more than 20 years, and they are studying the papyri and hoping we'll find more that from these texts that will teach us more about the Library of Alexandria. The final episode in this understanding of the Library of Alexandria is that in 614 AD, scholars state Persians conquered Egypt, sacked Alexandria, destroying anything not supporting the Muslim faith. And here's another sad note. Experts estimate about 1% of the knowledge contained in the Library of Alexandria survived to the modern world. 1%. In a letter Isaac Newton wrote to Robert Hooke in 1675, he said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants." Can you imagine if 100% of the knowledge from the Library of Alexandria had been available to Isaac Newton, what he could have seen? Have you ever heard of Archimedes, Galen the physician, or Plutarch? They either use the library or access texts from the library. And we will learn more about them when Granny goes down the rabbit hole of Alexandria, episode 4, and probably the final episode. Unless maybe some of those archaeologists learn more and I can update you guys. Thank you for joining me. I release videos every Thursday, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch my videos.